think you're seated back.
Oh,
Yeah. That's good.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Please be seated. We're going to get into opening statements. Mr. Petrofessa?
May it please the court, counsel. Almost exactly 1 year ago to today's date, Linda Murray and her husband, Hussein Murray, were enjoying the life that they had built over 54 years of marriage. They had raised a family, they were enjoying their grandkids. They had a house that was very nice in Rochester Hills that they had bought after 30 years of her husband, who goes by Sam, running two businesses. One was a pawn shop, one is a jewelry store, and their life was going along just like a storybook. But you'll hear that this story doesn't start off with once upon a time, because it doesn't have a fairy tale ending, and it doesn't have a happily ever after. And that's because on October 10th of 2024, the defendant and his co-defendant, Joshua Zuazo, knocked on their door. They knocked on their door at 10 p.m. Sam went to the door, opens the door. The defendant and his co-defendant are posing as DT workers. They start trying to get into the house. The defendant, Hernandez, is doing the talking. He's also the closest one to the door. Zuazo is behind him, and you'll see this because it's captured on Ring camera. And he's saying, we're in the neighborhood, there's a gas leak. And Linda is at the top of the stairs because she was in the bedroom, and she's looking down, and she says she can see them at the door frame. And she can also see them because the Ring camera bounces to her phone, so she can also see what's going on through the Ring camera. And she yells down to her husband, it's kind of late for a gas meter check. And they start still trying to get in with Hernandez, trying to get in. They have to check to see if you have a gas leak inside. And Linda is suspicious, and she yells down, Sam, do you have your gun? Because Sam was known to carry his gun on his right hip. He would carry a Glock, part of the business of pawn shop owning, down in Hamtramck, part of the business of jewelry store owning. It can be dangerous. He was armed. Sam isn't going to let him in the house at 10 o'clock. So he tells him, you're not coming in. At that point, Hernandez says, well, we'll come back tomorrow. So the door is shut. The defendant and his co-defendant leave. But that was not the end of the story. And in fact, little did they know, it wasn't even the start of the story. Because this was not random. This was not an accident. It was not coincidence that they showed up at his house. This was targeted, and this was very well planned. And you'll hear through the witnesses that way before October 10th, defendant Hernandez had been putting this in the works. You're going to hear that a year earlier, that in fact, we have the receipts as the investigation progressed, that in fact Hernandez had been to that jewelry and pawn shop, that he had pawned items at that store. We have those receipts. We also will show that he came back in February of 2024 to pick up his items. And you'll also hear how he specifically asked to meet with the owner when he was there to pick up his items that last time. And in fact, one of the witnesses was there when he was introduced to Sam, the owner, face to face. It's a business where people carry cash. It's a people may keep things of value at the house. So what Hernandez does at that point is he puts into work posing as a DTA. He goes out, orders signs that say DT to put on the sign of a vehicle. We have that video of him at the store ordering it, picking it up, him and his wife, Amanda. You're going to hear that, in fact, they didn't use, he has a white Jeep that he came up from Texas with. And he would come up back and forth from Texas with his wife, Amanda, back to Michigan, because Amanda's mother, Danielle, lives here. You'll hear they had a white Jeep, but they're not putting that DT sticker on the white Jeep. Instead, they're using a stolen vehicle, a stolen SD-250 that was stolen about 10 days earlier. That's what they're going to use to get there. And in fact, also other indicia of being DT as they try to pose as DT agents as they come in. Then you're going to hear that, in fact, the next morning, about, again, 10, 11 a.m., you're going to hear Linda had gone to a doctor's appointment. She had gone by herself. She had gotten back home. Sam's car, which was an older Audi, always in the same spot, very visible from the road. The Audi was also visible at his store. He would park where anybody could see, that's an Audi, that goes with Sam. So you could tell that Sam is home. Well, when Linda gets back in, Sam has just finished cooking food for his employees. It's a Friday, he's planning on going in about noon and he's bringing food to feed them. So that's on the kitchen counter. When Linda gets there, she starts cooking breakfast. And then there's the second knock on the door, which changes everything. And again, it's defendant Hernandez and defendant Zuazo at the door. Again, Sam is armed with his Glock on his waist. But this time, they talk their way into the residence. And as they come in, Linda will tell you that she recognized him from the night before. She's already testified about this at preliminary exam. She's already identified both of these guys at exam under oath. She'll say, I'll recognize them. It's the same guys from the night before. As they come in, she was maybe 10 feet away from the door. And they want to check the furnace downstairs in the basement. And this time, they're starting to go downstairs. She'll say that there's a weird segment where defendant Hernandez says he has to go back to the truck. So there's about 67 seconds when he's out of view, but she doesn't think he actually went out of the house again because the alarm when you go in and out didn't click. So she doesn't think he actually ever left a second time. And then Zuazo is kind of lingering off to the side. At that point in time, Sam is going to show them down into the basement where the gas hooks up inside. And you'll hear Sam is leading the way downstairs, and behind him is Zuazo, and behind him is defendant Hernandez, who closes the door. And that's going to be the last time Linda ever sees her husband alive. She'll say that at that point she went back to cooking, and probably another 10 or 15 minutes she's trying to cook and finish breakfast. She doesn't hear anything. She doesn't hear any commotion downstairs. She'll tell you that her husband Sam was not a quiet guy. You know, he was a naturally loud talker, but she doesn't hear anything. But instead, she'll tell you that defendant Hernandez comes up from downstairs. And when he comes up, and you can see he's a big, imposing guy, when he comes up, he says, "Where's the money?" "What? Where's the money? Where's the safe? Where's the jewels?" And she's like, "I got cash in my purse." And she says she had about $300 cash in her purse. And she'll say, "We don't have a safe. There's no safe." "So what about the jewels?" And she'll say, "The jewels are in a safety deposit box. I got costume jewelry upstairs. That's all I got." At that point in time, she starts saying, "Where's my husband? Where's my husband?" Hernandez doesn't answer. Then you're going to hear Zuazo comes up from downstairs. And she says, "Where's my husband?" And Zuazo says, "He's sleeping." And at that point in time, she sees blood on the front of Zuazo's shirt. She starts screaming. She's getting upset. So Hernandez hauls off and slugs her in the face. And you'll see the left side of her face and how it's bruised. He then puts her against the wall, so you're going to stop screaming. And she says she'll stop screaming. At which point in time, he puts her in the kitchen and starts to bind her with duct tape. And when he binds her with duct tape, he starts going through her purse. He wants the car keys. He wants the cash. He goes through a kitchen drawer. And Zuazo at this point in time, he doesn't flee and go out the front door. Instead, he goes upstairs and he ransacks the upstairs of the house looking for anything of value. And she'll tell you, he took stuff from the house, but it was nothing of great value. He went through my jewelry box He took my jewelry box, costume jewelry, wasn't worth anything. And that was gone. And then you'll hear in the upstairs, where Hernandez never goes, there's a blood swipe on the wall. She's now bound. They take her cell phone, they take her cash, and they finally leave the house through the garage. And she could say, I heard it around a few minutes when they went through the garage. They didn't have a clicker, but she hears a big boom where probably the garage was released from the remote control. So it comes slamming down. So the police get called and they arrive. And you'll see the body cam of what happens when they arrive. You'll see the first deputy who's there. He goes through the house eventually. You'll see that there's a lot of other deputies that respond also. You'll see the scene. And when you go downstairs and you see the scene, you'll see how brutally Sam was demolished. Physically just demolished. He's dead at the scene. There's no reviving him. As you've maybe figured out through our jury selection, the media quickly is on this case. Quickly, the Ring videos are out there to the public very quickly. And very quickly, Hernandez and Zuazo become suspects and of interest to the sheriff's office. Very quickly. And you're going to hear what Hernandez did after he leaves that scene. He goes, puts that truck in Detroit and sets it ablaze. Destroys the truck. You'll hear from the Detroit folks who responded to that scene just trying to demolish any type of evidence that's in the truck. It's ablaze, it's on fire, we know it's the truck. Then he hits the road with his wife, I think it's her child, and I think a couple pets. And they're headed out of here back to where we knew they lived at after they became a focus back in Texas. So you hear quickly that the sheriff office is on that. Sheriff office is putting out notices all the way through the path of where we expect them to be driving, and Louisiana comes across them first. And we have a detective from Louisiana flying up here. He's going to talk to you about everything that happened in Louisiana. And you're going to hear very clearly that when they go through that car, there's a lot of things of value that they find in that car for our case. They're going to tell you that they come across 3 pairs of size 13 Nikes. And on the bottom and on the inside of one of those pair of size 13 Nikes is blood, and the DNA comes back to the victim. You're going to hear that there's 2 other pairs of size 13 Nikes that aren't bloody. And then you'll hear that there's a size 11 tan work boots that also has blood on it, that also comes back to the victim. Then you're going to see, as they went through it, that there's a white size 5XL t-shirt with blood on it that comes back to the victim. You're going to hear that they also discover jewelry boxes in his luggage that he has packed up. And those jewelry boxes are very distinct. That costume jewelry is very distinct, and Linda will tell you that that's my stuff. And then you're going to hear that one of the things they also find in there is this POCO license plate, which was the original license plate on the burnt up vehicle before it got stolen. That goes back to the owner of that place. So you'll hear there's a conversation that takes place between the investigators and defendant Hernandez down in Louisiana. You'll play that for you. And then you're going to hear all these parts coming together to show you that not only was there DNA on the items that were found in Louisiana, but the crime scene folks also processed the actual basement crime scene. And you're going to hear that both defendants' DNA are found inside that basement, inside that crime scene, on pieces of duct tape that were used. And I think it's not going to be easy to watch. There's no 2 ways to say it. The pictures are not easy. The story is not easy. But I believe at the end of this case, after you've heard the testimony, after you've seen the evidence that we produce, and after Judge Polis reads to you the law that applies in this case, I believe you'll find the defendant guilty as charged on all the counts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Loftin.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, you do not have an easy job ahead of you. As we discussed in voir dire, you will be presented with unpleasant facts, photos, and testimony. You will have to set your feelings of sympathy aside and function as that machine that we discussed again in voir dire. You must take the facts, the testimony, and the evidence and apply it only to the elements of the crimes that Mr. Hernandez is charged with. Now, in an opening statement, it's our opportunity to introduce you to the people you will either hear from or hear about. This is extremely important because you as juror members have to determine who did what and why. The prosecutor and I will stand up here and argue our own theories of how the events unfolded, but ultimately, you make the final decision. Now, as you've heard in your preliminary instructions and the prosecutor touched on, my client is charged with 1 count of first-degree felony murder. And because the elements are so important, I want to go over them now. To prove this charge, the prosecutor must prove each and every one of the following elements beyond a reasonable doubt. Remember, not just 1 or 2, but all. First, that Mr. Hernandez caused the death of Hussein Murray, that he died as a result of neck compression and blunt force trauma. Second, that Mr. Hernandez had one of these 3 states of mind. He intended to kill, he intended to do great bodily harm, or he knowingly created a very high risk of death or great bodily harm, knowing that death or such harm would be the likely result of his actions. Third, that when he did the act that caused the death of Mr. Murray, that Mr. Hernandez was committing or attempting to commit or helping someone else commit the crime of larceny. Larceny is the taking of property with intent to permanently deprive the owner of that property. Fourth, that the killing was not justified, excused, or done under circumstances that reduce it to a lesser crime. I do not believe that the prosecutor will be able to prove to you that my client had any of the required states of mind for this charge. As you've also been told, my client is charged in count 2 and count 3, so 2 counts of the same charge, unlawful imprisonment. There is 1 charge as to Mr. Murray and 1 charge as to Mrs. Murray. The elements are the same. First, that Mr. Hernandez knowingly restrained in count 2 Mr. Murray and in count 3 Mrs. Murray. Restrain means to restrict someone's movements without their consent or lawful authority. Second, that the restrained person was secretly confined or the person was restrained to facilitate the commission of another felony or to facilitate flight after the commission of another felony. I know this is a lot of information, but I promise you, by the time you go back into that jury room, you will know these elements and you're going to be given a paper copy of them. Now, through witnesses, you're going to hear that on October 10th in the city of Rochester Hills, 2 men appeared at the Murray's door in the evening claiming to be DTE employees looking for a gas leak. You'll hear that they were not allowed in because it was late. You will hear that the following morning, those same individuals came back and at that time were allowed in the house by Mr. Murray. Approximately 20 minutes after they were let in, the individuals left. You will come to know that Mr. Murray was found deceased in the basement and Mrs. Murray was wrapped with duct tape and she was able to call 911 a few minutes later. Now, from the testimony, the videos, and the photograph, it will be clear to you that Mr. Hernandez was one of the individuals inside that residence on October 10th and October 11th. I will not insult your intelligence and try to convince you otherwise. But what I will convince you of is that the unfortunate death of Mr. Murray was never part of the plan, never even part of the discussion between Mr. Hernandez and the other individual. It will be clear to you that Mr. Hernandez did not take part in the beating of Mr. Murray. I do not believe that the prosecutor will be able to prove that Mr. Hernandez had any of the 3 required states of mind that must be present for felony murder. At the close of this case, it will be clear that there is only 1 verdict that is consistent with the law and consistent with the evidence that was presented. It'll be clear to you that the prosecutor is not able to prove by any standard, much less beyond a reasonable doubt, that my client, Mr. Hernandez, committed the offense of first-degree felony murder, and at that time, I will stand before you again and ask you to return a verdict of not guilty on count 1. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Loftin. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so as we discussed, we do have another jury that is currently not here. They'll be back tomorrow morning at 8:30 for us to start openings in the co-defendants matter. We would like to have you back at 9 a.m. If you come back at 9 a.m., I'll get you back into the courtroom as quickly as possible, and then the prosecution will start presenting their proofs. All right, so I'll see you tomorrow at 9 a.m. Thank you.
All right, the jury.
Anything else for the record at this time?
No, Your Honor.
Your Honor, I know I did discuss with your staff the placement of the tables and the placement of Mr. McCarthy. It would be my preference for safety for all that the co-defendant be seated farthest away from my client. I don't anticipate there's going to be any issue, but I definitely don't want there to be any issue.
Okay, so logistically, where would Mr. McCarthy sit then?
Here.
And where are you going to sit on the other side?
Yes, sir.
And Mr. McCarthy, though, takes issue with sitting there?
I was not present, but I believe so.
We just happened to have a off-the-cuff discussion about sitting and where we like to sit. And Mr. McCarthy yesterday said he always likes to sit closest to the podium. Just it had nothing to do with placement for this trial. It was just in general.
Okay, let's discuss it again tomorrow morning when
Understood.
everyone's back. And I mean, if there's a safety concern, then certainly we'll address that. Okay, all right, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Thank you.
All rise.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, juror in seat 9 is no longer with us. There's some information that we received that no longer allows you to serve on this jury. That should not affect your opinion or how we move forward or any of the voir dire process that we've had. But we do want to know whether or not anyone discussed in the jury room this morning any information that was provided to us through juror seat 9. We'll just take hands if anyone talked to juror seat 9 or juror seat 9 share any information with anyone. It's important for us to know that at this time. I'm seeing all nods, so nobody had a conversation this morning with juror seat 9. Counsels, are you comfortable with that?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay,
Yes, Your
all right,
Honor.
then we're going to go right into openings. Good morning. Go ahead, Mr. Brashkassa.
May it please the court, counsel. Good morning. About a year ago, you're going to hear that Linda Murray and her husband, Hussein Murray, who would also go by the name Sam, were enjoying the fruits of their 54 years of marriage. They had raised a family, they were enjoying grandkids. Her husband Sam was still working on a regular basis at the two businesses that he had run for almost 3 decades. Down in Hamtramck, he had both a pawn shop and also a jewelry shop. And he would still go there on a regular basis. And you'll hear as the testimony comes in that that life that they were living and were expecting to continue to live came to an abrupt end starting on October 10th of 2024 when there was a knock on the door. And that knock on the door was at 10 p.m. And that knock on the door was with this defendant, Joshua Zuazo, and his co-defendant, Carlos Hernandez. Little did they know when that knock on the door came that their fate was about to be changed forever, and there was no going back. Linda Murray is going to testify this morning, and she's going to tell you that there was a knock at about 10 o'clock, and she's upstairs getting ready for bed, and her husband Sam is downstairs. And when that knock comes, they had a house that was set up with Ring cameras. And there's several Ring cameras around the house, and the Ring cameras also not only let you know somebody's there, but they also give you the video of what's going on at the knock on the door. So Sam goes to the door, and she's at the top of the stairs, and she'll tell you she could see what happens at the front door. And she'll tell you when the door opens, defendant Hernandez and defendant Zuazo are standing there, and they're dressed as DTE employees, and they are not DTE employees, but they're posing as DTE employees, and they want to get into the house. So they're saying, we're here because there's a gas leak, and we need to get in and check the house. And Linda's suspicion is up right away, and she yells down, it's kind of late for a gas leak check, isn't it? And her husband Sam has the door open, and Hernandez is still having a conversation about needing to check the gas. And Linda shouts down, Sam, do you have your gun on you? Because Sam, because of his businesses, because of the pawn shop, because of the jewelry, was licensed to carry a firearm and would carry a Glock on his right side. The conversation ends. Sam says, you're not coming in. It's too late. And then Hernandez says, well, we'll be back tomorrow. The door closes. They continue on with their night. You'll hear in the next morning that Linda has a doctor's appointment, and she goes to the doctor's appointment. She gets back to the house about 10 o'clock. When she gets to the house, Sam's already been cooking that morning because she's going to bring in food for his employees. It's a Friday now. And he often would cook for the employees, and he'd bring it in to share with them throughout the day so they had something to eat at lunchtime. Usually would go in around noon. So she gets in there, she starts cooking up breakfast for her and her husband. There's nobody else who lives at the house. It's just the two of them. So as she's doing that, Sam has already made the food. He's over in the family room. There's another knock on the door. And this time, when they go to the door, Linda's now on the first floor, and she cuts through between the kitchen and the front door, and she's looking towards the front door, and she can see that it's the same two guys who were there the night before. And she will identify defendant Zuazo and defendant Hernandez as the two guys who were there. You will see the Ring camera videos of all of these. And again, they want to come into the house. They have fake DTE badges. They come along with props like gas detector that you can buy on Amazon for $25, and they want to get in. This time Sam lets them in to check for the gas. So as they come into the house, the gas that they want to check is going to be in the basement. So at first, Zuazo comes in and kind of lingers around. I think Linda thought he was going to go to the gas dryers. He doesn't. And then Hernandez says something kind of strange, like, well, I forgot something out in the truck. So he disappears slightly, but she doesn't hear the alarm in the house beep. So she doesn't really believe he actually left the house to go out to the truck. And then you're going to hear that her husband, Sam, leads down into the basement. And you're going to hear that Zuazo is the first one to follow him down the stairs. And then Hernandez comes behind. And Hernandez closes the door. And that's the last time Linda ever saw her husband alive. She'll tell you that she's in the kitchen. She's doing breakfast. She hasn't finished it. It takes 10 to 15 minutes. She doesn't hear anything coming from the basement. She doesn't hear commotion. She doesn't hear screaming. She'll tell you, I believe, that her husband was a loud talker, and that for his age, he was a strong, physically fit guy. She doesn't hear anything. So as the door opens, up comes Hernandez first. Hernandez now, and you'll see the pictures between the entry exit to the basement is very close to the kitchen. Hernandez is there, and he starts saying, where's the cash? Where's the safe? Where's the jewelry? It's like, we don't have a safe. I got cash in my purse. It's like, where's my husband? It's like, where's the cash? Where's your jewelry? Jewelry's in a safety deposit box. Where's my husband? And then you'll hear, up comes defendant Zuazo. And now she sees him at close range. And she sees blood on his shirt. And at that point in time, she starts screaming. She starts screaming. What happened to my husband? Where's my husband? And Zuazo says to her, he's sleeping. Then you're going to hear Hernandez, who is a huge human being. I think he's like 6'5", 450 pounds, hauls off and punches Linda on the left side of the face. She's then pushed by Hernandez. Are you going to shut up? She said, I'll stop screaming. At which point in time, he starts in the kitchen to bind her up with duct tape. At that point, where's your cash? In my purse. Starts going through a kitchen drawer. Where's your car keys? They're attached to the purse. And while that's going on, you'll hear defendant Zuazo doesn't leave the house. He doesn't go in the car. He doesn't drive away. He doesn't run down the street. Instead, what he does is he goes upstairs and ransacks the bedrooms up there looking for valuables. Goes into the master bedroom, which is completely ransacked. You'll see photos of it. Goes through the other bedrooms, and you'll see that there's a jewelry box that had her jewelry, which was valueless, costume jewelry. And one of the drawers from that jewelry box is taken. And you're also going to hear that defendant Hernandez does not go upstairs. Only defendant Zuazo goes upstairs. And in one of the bedrooms that he ransacks, you'll see that there's a blood smear on the wall. That blood smear, when it's tested by the Oakland County lab, come back to the victim, Sam Murray. He comes back down, time to go, so they exit through the garage. Now, they don't have a fob for the garage, so she says they're in there for a little bit, and she hears a huge boom, which is probably because the garage is disconnected. If you don't have a way to open it, you can disconnect it, pull it up, and pull it down. It comes crashing down. She hears it from inside the kitchen. She gets the ability to call the police because they take her cell phone on the house line, and the sheriff's office arrives. You'll see that body cam as soon as we start going with testimony this morning. And it's one of the things that we talked about in jury selection. There's a lot of officers who arrive. That's before they go into the basement. There's a lot more officers who arrive after they go into the basement. Because when you go into the basement, what you see is Sam is on the ground. It's a horrible scene, brutal scene, very bloody scene. The Emmy will tell you about the damage he sustained down in that basement. But you're going to see that his hands are duct taped, his feet are duct taped. They're also zip tied, other zip ties there. You'll see that the gun that would have been on his right side was gone, never found. And you'll hear what a brutal end to his life happened on that October 11th. You're going to hear how the investigation, because the sheriff's department with the Ring camera smartly and quickly released it to the media. And the media put it out on TV immediately, which was a great thing because they start getting tips. And as you'll see, it's not hard to see, defendant Hernandez sticks out physically. So the focus quickly turned onto defendant Hernandez and also defendant Zuazo. You'll hear from a witness who worked with him, who says, I saw the video, I recognized him, I recognized what he was wearing from, that was what we used to wear at work. And so and I recognized his voice. So I knew who that was. So the sheriff's office quickly gets on to trying to track down where they are. Now, what is happening with the defendants at this point in time? Well, they're trying to destroy evidence. So you're going to hear that truck, which was a stolen truck that was stolen about 10 days before. You'll have that witness come in and say that the truck was in front of my house. It was our work truck. I went to bed at 11, it was there. I woke up at 5, it was gone. So he'll come in and say how that truck was stolen. One more layer of trying to get away with what happened on October 10th and 11th. Then you're going to hear that the plate that was on the truck was actually stolen from DT itself. So if anyone was to have run it, say, is this a DT truck? It would have actually come back to DT because that plate was stolen. So that truck is taken down to Detroit. It's set on fire. You'll hear how the Detroit officers responded to the blaze. There's actually a photo of the truck on fire as that piece of evidence is trying to be destroyed. So the sheriff's department quickly starts, there's a thing called the flock system. It's used to be few places, now it's every place. Pretty soon, you're not gonna be able to drive without them being able to track your plate if they want to, because it photographs the plates. And they got him, Hernandez, going south. And they're also aware now that they've started their investigation that Hernandez has another residence that he uses down in Texas. So they put out a bulletin all the way down the trip, what they expect to be to Texas, and Louisiana on October 12th quickly comes in contact with them and pulls them over. They conduct a search warrant, and what you're going to hear they find in the vehicle that Hernandez is driving is the original license plate on the stolen truck that's designated POCO, because I think that's the company's name. That's in there. You're also going to hear that there are size 13 shoes, 3 pair of size 13 shoes. And on one of those pair of 13 shoes, there's blood. And when the lab tests that blood comes back to the victim, Sam Murray. You're also going to hear there's 1 pair of size 11 brown boots. Not size 13, but size 11. There's also blood on that. Those boots also come back to the victim. Then you're going to hear that there's a bucket hat found in that, a bucket hat that is identified by witnesses as the defendant wearing on prior occasions. And then you're going to hear that as the investigation continued, the lab that was processing that scene comes up with DNA of both defendants on different items that were found at the scene and in the basement. As the case progresses, you're going to hear evidence that throughout this course of events, which started way before October 10th and 11th, because as the investigation now focuses, you're going to hear that in fact, defendant Hernandez had gone to Mr. Murray's store almost a year earlier, back in October 2023. And he had pawned items there. And he's going to be identified by witnesses as being a guy who they remember coming into that store. By his size, he stuck out. They also have the records of his pawn slips. And then you're going to hear how he came back in February of 2024 and was also at that store. This time at the store, horrible, horrible detail. But he actually asked to be introduced to the owner. And he was introduced face to face to the owner, Sam. And you'll hear that Sam would park his car at that building, open to the public. You could see his car, it's an older Audi. You could see that he would park his car outside the house in the driveway, so you could see if he's home or not home. So this was not random, this was not an accident, this was targeted. They did not give up after the first time, where a lot of folks might have said it didn't work. They may call DTA, they may call the cops, I'm not showing back up tomorrow. That doesn't happen. They're back on October 11th to finish that mission. And that mission was also planned by getting false DTA stickers for the side of the truck. This was well planned, well targeted, and ended horribly. And you'll hear, I think, at the conclusion of this case, and I think you'll come to the conclusion that they were in it together from before the 10th, the 11th, and after. All of these factors, I believe you'll find the defendant guilty as charged on all counts. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Mr. McCarthy?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning. The first thing I want to do this morning is to extend Mr. Zuazo's sincere thanks to each and every one of you who have set aside the business that you would have been attending to this week had you not been summoned to the Oakland County Courthouse to serve as a juror. And he has known about this case since the 18th day of October last year, when he was in custody and brought before a judge and advised at his arraignment of what the charges against him were. Very serious charges. First-degree felony murder for the death of Mr. Murray, and the unlawful imprisonment of Mr. Murray, and the unlawful imprisonment of Mrs. Murray. So since that day, the 18th day of October in 2024, Mr. Zuazo has been looking forward to this day. He didn't know when his trial would begin. He didn't know who among his fellow citizens would be summoned to the Oakland County Courthouse to serve as the triers of fact, the people who will determine the truth in this case. But he did know this, that once his case was presented before a group such as yourselves, that the truth would then be known. So he's been waiting for this day as his day of vindication. And it is for that reason that I extend his sincere thanks, as well as my own, for you all serving as the jurors in this very serious matter. Now, the questions that you have to determine are all focused on Joshua Zuazo. You don't have to make any findings of fact as it affects the co-defendant, Mr. Hernandez. And that is as it should be. There's a separate jury that will deal with the facts associated with him. But because the allegations are that the two men worked in concert, or that at least this, and this is what I am prepared to concede today, is that Mr. Hernandez did not work alone. His jury will have to determine the facts regarding his case, but you, sitting here, taking in the evidence, are not going to have any question in your mind whatsoever that the first person at the door to try and enter the Murray home on the night, or during the night of October 10 of last year, is Carlos Hernandez. As Mr. Petrofessa said just a few moments ago, and you all will see for yourselves in a little while when both juries are assembled and the testimony begins, he is a distinctive individual by his size. He's 6'5", or I read in one report 6'6". When he was arrested in October of last year, he weighed 450 pounds. I don't know exactly what he weighs in at this time now, but the fact of the matter is a very big individual. Certainly one who stands out. And you'll see the ring videos, you'll have a feeling for a very good eye view of who the first person is. The question in this case is one of identification, as to all of you. Now, I understand what Mr. Petrofessa said, that he intends to present evidence, the people do, that would show that Mr. Zuazo is that second person. Your job is to determine whether he is correct, and has he proven that allegation of identification beyond a reasonable doubt. In the law, depending on the seriousness or the type of case there is, we have different measuring sticks by which different juries determine what is the truth. In a criminal case, that measuring stick is the highest burden of proof in the law, proof beyond a reasonable doubt. You can't have, and Judge Polis has already given you a description of what a reasonable doubt is. She's going to instruct you on it again at the end. But I ask you to keep that in mind, because what your job as jurors is to scrutinize the evidence, listen carefully to it, and come to a conclusion that you are convinced is the correct one. Either that the people have failed to prove, or they did prove beyond a reasonable doubt. It's a serious obligation. And I'm sure when you received that summons, whenever that was, it said you had to be here this past Monday to serve as jurors, or at least potentially serve as jurors, you looked at it as not a wonderful opportunity to do some public service or civic duty, but as an interference in whatever it is that each of you would have been doing this week. But now, because you have taken that solemn oath that was administered to you on Monday afternoon, your job is to determine the truth. That's what a trial is. It's a search for the truth, and you all are the truth finders and determiners. So just along those lines, I want to tell you that if you let your mind wander while we are all gathered here together and start thinking about those things that you would be doing this week had you not been summoned and sworn in to serve as a juror, while the testimony is being presented or exhibits are being displayed, the evidence in the case, you're going to miss something. If you go this afternoon at lunchtime and have a excellent meal somewhere, and when we get into the afternoon session today or tomorrow or Friday or however long this trial lasts, and that meal starts to settle and your eyes become heavy and you start to drift off, you're going to miss something. Don't let that happen. This is serious business. And that oath that maybe went in one ear and out the other has real serious implications. And the reason for all that is, and the reason why it's so important that you listen, is because in the end, when all the evidence has been presented, and the arguments of Mr. Petrofessa and myself have been presented, and Mr. Magaro, and Judge Polis has concluded, giving you her final instructions on the law, 12 of you will be chosen to go back into that jury room where right now you can talk about anything except this, the only reason why we're all here together. And then begin your deliberations, your discussions about what the evidence is. And that's where paying attention is essential, because you can't honestly participate in those discussions if you weren't paying attention. And the way and the reason why, and you know, even as wonderful as the United States is, we didn't come up with this idea of 12 people on a jury. That goes back to the old English common law, and it's been around for centuries longer than the United States has existed. And the reason it's done that way is because 12 people of differing life experiences and just knowledge of life in general sit down, they listen to what the evidence is, and then they all tell their different perspectives. And they engage with one another and come to a determination of the truth. And that's, while I am cross-examining witnesses and listening carefully to everything that goes on during the course of the trial, while Mr. Magaro and Mr. Petrofessa are examining witnesses and doing exactly the same thing, you all will be sizing everybody up. One of the things that Judge Polis has already instructed you on, and she's going to instruct again, I'm pretty confident, at the conclusion of the trial, is listening to the witnesses. And I'm not going to say that any person who comes into this courtroom and takes an oath to tell you the truth, because I know who these witnesses are, and I've read what they've said in the past, and I have an understanding of what I expect you all are going to see. I'm not going to tell you that anybody's a liar. But one of the instruction you get on listening to witnesses is people can give testimony about what they think they saw, say it honestly because that's really what they believe, and still simply be wrong. You know, I am not a very good mathematician. I had trouble with that when I got to trigonometry. But I understand that, you know, we all understand 2 and 2 is 4. But a person can add up a column of numbers and get the wrong answer, think they're right, they answered it on their test paper because they thought it was correct, and simply be wrong. This information that you're going to hear during the course of this trial is traumatic, and it's disturbing. And as you sit through it, you are going to be traumatized yourself to a certain extent, because you're going to see some photographs that are pretty rough to look at of Mr. Murray, where he was found by the deputies that went to their home, the Murray home, and started their investigation. You're going to see Mrs. Murray testify. She herself is a victim of a crime. There isn't any question that this happened. It's a question of who did it. And the identification is the issue as it affects Joshua Zuazo. But you're going to see terrible things. Then it's hard to do that. And it's especially hard to do it when you're the trier of fact. Because unlike anybody else, you are obligated to use cold-eyed calculation to determine the truth. You can't let sympathy or emotion enter into your decision-making about what the facts actually are. It's a hard job, and I don't envy you. And I know what all it is that you're going to see during the course of the next few days. So I can tell you right now from the beginning, it's pretty tough stuff. And that certainly wasn't something that you planned on having happen to you when you opened your mail on the day that your jury summons came. But I'm confident in each and every one of you. I don't know if you noticed, but I actively participated in the jury selection that we conducted on Monday. And I can assure you, if I didn't have that confidence as a fairly well-experienced attorney, you would not be occupying the seats where you find yourselves today. Now, I'm going to have, and I want you to just keep a couple of things in mind regarding this issue of identification. Well, the ring camera makes it really clear who the big fellow is. It doesn't really identify Mr. Zuazo. And there'll be quite a bit of questioning about that. The person, Kelly Broad, who says that, and I expect his testimony will be, because I have some knowledge of it, that he saw that ring video on television in the days immediately after this event took place. And he came forward and he made an identification of Mr. Zuazo. I will have a series of questions for him, and I ask you to listen with keen interest there, because that's a really important thing. He's an essential witness in this case for the prosecution to establish that Mr. Zuazo is the person. And the question will be, and the one that I will raise in the end in my closing argument, is whether Kelly Broad is correct. This is an important and serious matter, and you want to see justice done, and I get that. But justice and retribution, they don't equal the same thing. And your job as jurors is to find what the real facts are and to make a determination regarding whether the correct person has been, and that is Joshua Zuazo, has been identified as the second man involved in this case. It isn't that it didn't happen. It isn't that it isn't a terrible crime, or they are all terrible crimes. But the question for you as Joshua Zuazo's jurors is whether he is the second man. And is he responsible for any of the crimes that were committed on October the 11th? I thank you for the attention you've paid so far. I know you'll pay attention during the course of the trial, and I look forward to getting my next opportunity to speak with you when I present my closing argument on behalf of Mr. Zuazo at the end of the evidence presentation. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. McCarthy. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so I'm going to send you back to the jury room for about 10 minutes. When you come back the next time, we will have both juries in here. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to kind of swap between where you sit. I don't know where you're going to be brought in, but you're either going to be brought in here, you're going to be brought in one of those front two rows. Obviously, it's more comfortable to be sitting where you're sitting right now, so we are going to be cognizant of that and try to switch between the breaks. But right now, just procedurally need to set that up and see you back in about 10 minutes.
All right, for the jury, please.
what's more convenient for the sheriff's department, to take down Mr. Zuazo and bring him up with Mr. Hernandez, or can we just bring up Mr. Hernandez now?
I would say probably, are we looking to do a few hours? I'm assuming I would take him down, let him use the bathroom if need be, and then.
And then bring him up?
We'll bring Mr. Hernandez up first.
Okay, and then is Miss Loftin or?
That way they don't have to cross paths.
Okay, perfect. Is Miss Loftin here? She
Yeah,
is.
I saw
Okay.
her already, Judge.
Okay, all right, so let's do that, and then we will be back. All right.
It's that reason podium there.
So do what you can.
How's that?
Give them a chance to